use my affiliate link to support the channel down in the description. Hey, what's up guys? MyGamesGX here, and I was requested to make a video about the most fun decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, this is much more of a subjective list, however, I feel like we could also just go from anecdotal evidence and from player favorites from the years and talk about some of the decks that have really just piqued players' interest, have unique play styles, and also present new win conditions that have made these decks stand out to other players. Now, like I said, this is subjective. What you might find fun might be boring to others. Like a Bujin deck back in the day might have been a pretty slow deck to somebody, but to me that was a pretty fun deck. But I want to really go from what my Discord said and then just from history and talk about just the most fun decks you could be playing in Yu-Gi-Oh! How to have fun with Yu-Gi-Oh! Really, because Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end of the day is a card game, so you should be trying to have fun with the card game. It is competitive. I'm a competitive player myself. However, I think the best way to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! And to enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! Is to have fun with it. I play alternate formats for this reason. So let's talk about the most fun decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! To play. Let's talk about Discord member Sammy talking about playground decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Playground decks, you know, basically just cobbling together your own 60 plus card pile to bring with your friends when you're all hanging out as kids. I'm pretty sure we've all been there. At least when I was a kid, I used to have like an 80 card deck. I didn't know how the rules worked too much, but all the neighborhood kids in the cul-de-sac basically also had decks too. So we had our own rules, we had our own cards, we had our own decks, and honestly that was some of the most fun Yu-Gi-Oh! I could have been having at the time. We just had fun with, like, we had an old win condition that was akin to Exodia, except you had to get Ancient Brain plus Mystic Elf with Monster Reborn, and if you use these cards in tandem, you won the game. Now this probably just sounds more of a win/cheat tactic because the kids were a bit older than me, but it was something that we all had fun with, and I think that playground Yu-Gi-Oh! Is kind of one of the best ways to start Yu-Gi-Oh! Just have fun with your friends, with your family, just pick up a deck, read the card text, and just kind of go back and forth, figure out the game yourself, because it's a pretty intuitive game, Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end of the day. A lot of people just learn the game from watching the anime. Next, let's talk about one of my tried and true favorites that we actually just made a video on because they're getting new support, and this is Lightsworn. The Lightsworn archetype released in 2007, I believe, in Light of Destruction, and this set in this archetype has fun just associated with it and is one of the most fan favorite sets. You see Konami reprinting 3 different Lightsworn sets in anticipation of the new support. So why is Lightsworn so fun? Because Lightsworn revolves around the mechanic of milling. In Magic, mill is a specific word. Yu-Gi-Oh! We do not have mill as a specific keyword. It's usually sent to the graveyard from your deck. Something worded along those lines. However, but milling is really fun in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because a lot of cards get better in the graveyard. They have graveyard effects, and Lightsworn is... They all have really good generic effects. One's a Monster Reborn, the other one's a pop, and the other one just specs itself when it's milled. So you're getting free resources anytime you're milling, essentially, with all your cards, and they all mill. And then if you get enough of the names in the graveyard, you get their boss monster, Judgment Dragon, which blows up the field and usually gets you a game win. So I think for that reason, Lightsworn has always had a very defined fun win condition on top of a mechanic that will get you there. And on top of that, it's just so splashable that you've seen it through the years in so many decks where you see like Patrick Hoban winning a YCS with Lightsworn Shadal. And you know, just like in 2015 after the deck, like 7 years after the deck, and then you see the support coming out now. The cards are so much fun. I highly recommend playing Lightsworn if you have not already tried it. On that token, I feel like another fan favorite deck that we can talk about are Dinos. Dinos came out in around 2016, 2017 when we finally got UTC, Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, the retrain, which basically is an incredible boss monster to this day, having a blanket quick effect Book of Moon effect and being able to pierce. It's just an OTK machine on top of the card Miscellaneousaurus, which basically makes all your dinosaurs towers. The card is so good it had to go to 1 on top of being able to get out a monster free. So this card, so on top of these cards coming out, it led to one of the most fun decks in Yu-Gi-Oh's history because you're able to go second blind and actually be able to win a lot of games. On top of that, dinosaurs are a very heavy combo deck if you you want to do, which is always fun. And on top of that, the play style, you're just destroying your dinos and specking more dinos. Dinos are always fun. I think this has been a fan favorite deck, and I think a lot of people are looking forward to when the deck gets more substantial support. I mean, that's why you see Ground Xeno being so much money, even when the deck isn't that good or meta relevant at the moment. Next, we can talk about Tearlaments. So Tearlaments was a deck that came out with Power of the Elements 2022. It's actually around the time I got back into the game. And this deck was insane. It was essentially Shadalls plus Lightsworn on top of Branded, because you had Fusion, you had Milling, all wrapped into one. And this deck was incredible, and you guys see with the ban list now putting most of the cards to 1 and even banning their star monster Kikalos, that the deck has been a force to be reckoned with. You see this being you see this in full display with Tier 0 format, which were several months of the Yu-Gi-Oh game's lifespan, where the deck was the only deck played and was the only deck competitively viable besides maybe Sprite on the ends. But most of the time you just saw Tearlament mirrors. You saw Jesse Cotton just always going against Pack versus Honey versus Crix LeBlanc. You see all these competitive players were just doing mirror matches for these several months, and it got a lot of casual people out of the game, but a lot of competitive players really liked this because it was a very skillful mirror match, because of the fact that the only thing going on was an Abyss Dweller that could possibly lock each other out, but each other were playing so many cards because the deck played on your opponent's turn, so you were always playing on your opponent's turn and able to disrupt your opponent from going into a board that prevented you from play. So it usually just ended up being who was the best pilot of the deck that came up on top. So it led to a fun yet skillful format for some, but a negative experience for others, for the more casual player base. And who likes playing the same format for too long, to be honest? I don't. Next, on top of that, we did mention it, Shadalls. Shadalls is one of my favorite decks of all time because it was the first deck in Yu-Gi-Oh's history that really just provided a free boss monster out of using your deck through Shadal Fusion, like Branded Fusion, and gave you cards like Winda and Construct, which Construct was an incredible extender. Kiklolos of its day, it got banned, and then it also provided OTK Machine on top of Winda being a special summon Floodgate, just being able to basically gimmick puppy your opponent. But the best part was that all the Shadal effects get effects when they are sent to the graveyard, so you can mix it with the likes of Lightsworn and other mill tactics in order to get a deck that basically could play on your opponent's turn, disrupt your opponent, and generate you huge advantage just from your opponent playing into it. And they were also all flip effect monsters. Flip effect monsters were basically made irrelevant after GOAT format, and the fact is, this deck made flip effects actually good again for the first time in years, since this was 2015 and GOAT format was in about 2007. So we gotta give Konami credit for that with their nice design with the Shadal monsters, even if the flip effects are not good nowadays. Next, we have Valence. Valence is actually one of the most unique archetypes that we're going to be talking about. There's two variants. There's an FTK variant, and there's more of a combo pendulum build, where you could focus around Appaloosa with 3 materials, make a Momonoka, their dedicated fusion monster, and Arkelos 12 on field. The deck just plays like no other, and it's usually pretty hard for players to figure out what the deck is even trying to do, so it's pretty hard to navigate interruptions like hand traps or even good board breakers or side deck cards. It's just one of the most underused archetypes. You don't really see it used much in competitive. However, its ability to just like basically use columns in a way to win the game, break your opponent's board, and generate advantage is unparalleled, on top of being a pendulum deck, which are pretty fun, being able to have a separate pool from anyone else to special summon out of and get free special summons from the hand. Then there's other little things like anime archetypes. We do got the Yugi, the Dark Magician archetype. The Yugi archetype coming out in Legacy Destruction will be very cool with the Gandora. It's finally like the end of the Duel Monsters anime. We're finally getting the rest of Yugi and the Pharaoh's monsters from the end of the Duel Monsters anime, so you're going to be able to make a deck around it. They're all looking like secret rares, which is unfortunate, but they should still be pretty cheap and will be a fun deck. Fun, yet probably not competitively viable, but you might see some builds here or there that people will be able to cook up, which is very cool. You like to see Konami making older, even anime cards relevant because they want to make all decks playable. They like it when a lot of decks are playable. On top of that, no, we can say things like Toons or Salamangre. I think Toons has actually been one of those card decks that have been Toons is one of those decks that has been heavily supported in recent days with really good support out of Toon Chaos, with the retrained Toon World and the new monsters being actually fairly good. You don't see it doing anything tournament wise, but hey man, if you want to bring it to a locals or have a fun deck for your with your friends or family, it's one of those very actually interesting and intuitive decks that you would be able to take your opponents by surprise a lot of the time with a lot of their effects. And the last one in terms of anime decks would have to be Salamangreat. I've heard so much good things about people playing Salamangreat. It is an anime deck. On top of that, it's one of the most explosive link decks that can always just end on a board with an Omni Negate plus a pop 4, but you have so many different routes and so many different cards, and you have an anime to get behind the deck, really get into the lore of the deck. It's going to be one of the most fun archetypes that you can use if you want a link deck. Now, in terms of the last deck I'm going to recommend, it's Branded. I love Branded, man. You can do anything with this deck. It's one of the most it's one of the least straightforward decks in the game. It's almost like painting a canvas. You kind of have to put into it. You get what you put into it, and you have to do good deck building, good interaction play, know your deck, but you get heavily rewarded, and it's very fun deck building and navigating through boards because you can break basically any board with it and set up one of the best turn 1 boards in the game at the moment through Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. Let's see if it gets banned by any point by now. But if you guys like this video, please leave a like. I'm going to do more general content like this. Please let me know. I'd love to do more stuff like this. Leave a comment down below. We will get into it then. See you guys later.